300 patients who had suffered heart and breathing failure for a prolonged period. To his surprise, only a very few reported near-death experiences.
There was no explanation whatsoever. There was no difference between the 82% of patients who survived cardiac arrest without an NDE and the 18% who had an NDE. When it would have been a physiological explanation, say the anoxia of the brain, you would expect everybody to have that experience if the anoxia is the explanation.
So Van Lommel concluded that oxygen starvation was not responsible for NDEs. When a pacemaker is implanted under a general anesthetic, it triggers an artificial cardiac arrest. An EEG, a machine that registers tiny electrical signals coming from the brain cells and nerves, monitors activity.
What you see that is after 6...
What you see is that after 6.5 seconds, the EEG started to show chemical responses, and then at an average of 15 seconds, the EEG is flat.
Van Lommel believes that on the brink of death, there is a 6-second window when the brain is triggering specific chemicals that might cause hallucinations. But once that window closes and the brain shuts down, no more images or feelings can be received. But there are some cases which seem to defy this scientific logic. Vicky Umipeg from Seattle in the USA has been blind since birth. In January 1973, she was terribly injured in a car crash.
I had a skull fracture, concussion, neck injury, back injury, leg injury, and I was dead for 4 minutes.
Vicky's heart had stopped. Was she clinically dead, or just in a deep coma?
My back was up against the ceiling, and then I was looking down at everything. The one doctor said, well, it's a pity now that she could be deaf as well as blind because there's blood on her left eardrum. And then the female doctor said, well, we don't even know if she's going to survive this coma, and if she does, she could be in a permanent vegetative state, and that made me mad.
As she fought for her life, something even more extraordinary happened. Vicky could see for the very first time.
I felt like it was a nightmare because I have never been accustomed to perceiving of anything from a distance. And I touch things. My world is at arm's length. I perceive of everything tactily, and I couldn't translate what it was that I was receiving. And it was scary to be able to, a lot of people have asked me, well, wasn't it wonderful to see? Actually, no, it wasn't. It was terrible initially. I saw this ring on my left ring finger, and I thought, okay, that is me. And I also realized I had very long hair then down to my waist, and I realized that they'd shaved off quite a lot of it, and I was pretty upset about that.
How could Vicky's blind eyes see?
I mainly dream even with taste, touch, sound, and smell, but in my dreams there is no light, no color, and there are no visual impressions.
Vicky's experience interests scientists. She works with a psychologist from New York University specializing in the near-death experiences of the blind, Sharon Cooper.
If you compared her case with many sighted near-death experiencers, you would not find differences. The only difference that I was able to discern between her case and a sighted person is her description of color. She called it different brightnesses of light, and that's because she had no way to understand what color was. She did notice differences in the environment during her experience. She just didn't know what to call them.
Vicky Umipeg survived and returned to her world of darkness. She still has no doubt that for just a few minutes, she was able to see.
I do know that there are many people who are going to be skeptical and who don't understand and who don't believe what I say, but I know what I experienced, I know what I saw, I know what I heard, I know what I felt. And so I just leave it at that.
Vicky's story seems to challenge rational scientific explanation, and there are others. How does science explain another widely reported part of the near-death experience, floating outside the body?
We know how the different experiences work in the brain and why they unfold in the way they do. You just have to have something that will trigger off that kind of natural human capacity.
Cardiologist Pim van Lommel also has his own explanations about how images are received into a non-functioning brain.
Till now we had a concept.
Until now we had a concept that consciousness and memories are generated by your brain. If this concept is true, then it would not be possible to experience your full consciousness with memories from early childhood, with cognition, with emotion, with perception, above and beyond your body, during a period when your brain is not functioning.
Of your brain that is not functioning.
But if the brain is dead and unable to generate images, where do they come from? Van Lommel's controversial theory is that in some way consciousness exists outside the brain, something it can plug into.
So I compare the brain with a kind of...
So I compare the brain with a kind of receiver, as an interface, as a decoder for consciousness, to connect consciousness to our world. The internet you receive is not in your computer. When you switch your computer off, the internet is still everywhere.
Everywhere where you put another computer on.
If his theory is correct, then the visual components of NDEs are visions of an unplugged brain floating freely through a web of consciousness. Few agree.
Many NDE researchers genuinely believe that consciousness can operate outside the brain. I think they're wrong. Ultimately, it's an empirical question, and we'll know the answer in the end. If I live long enough, I'll probably be able to look back and see, they did or didn't find it. But right now, the evidence is not convincing at all to me, and I would say to the majority of scientists.
And psychological studies have shown that believing imagined experiences to be true can lead to the development of false memory syndrome. People start thinking that events that never happened are real. Science is struggling to unlock the mystery of memory and consciousness. There's much we just don't understand. We do know that from early childhood the brain starts selecting some events to store. We don't know why that selection is made, how it's stored, or why some memories resurface. A world expert on this complex process is Nobel Prize winner, neurologist Philip Sharp.
We believe those synaptic contacts between cells are modified by experience in a way that stores memory. There is probably also memory stored in the birth of new cells, and there may even be new mechanisms that we do not know about that stores memory. The interesting thing about memory is it's got to span from milliseconds to lifetimes. So is one mechanism adequate to explain the memory of a second ago and the memory I have of my childhood 50 years ago? Perhaps not.
Many patients report that during an NDE, a lifetime's memories flash before their eyes. Can science explain what triggers this part of the experience?
I saw everything in my life from my birth up until the car crash when I was 22 years old. I saw everything that I had been through. I saw people who had mistreated me. I saw people that I'd had wonderful experiences